tip for everybody, when we come to the Q&A, there are basically a few ground rules that I like to have, which are, can you please ask a question? So if you've got a point to make it really short so you can get to the question. Keep it short, and then the panelists, if you can keep your answers short as well, all right? I'm only going to go to one of you probably for any one question, so we can get through as many as possible in the short time we've got. It also keeps the energy levels in the room quite high, and it actually makes it a little bit more enjoyable. So, in terms of now that's the preamble done. I'm Sean Fitzgerald. I'm Director of Research for Cambridge Zero at the University of Cambridge, and also Director of the Centre for Climate Repair. I've got 4 fantastic panelists, but rather than me do an inept job of introducing them, I'm going to make sure that they do that at the beginning of each of their sessions. So I thought we would start just with an overview, and I'm part of a programme which is funded by Horizon Europe. It's a £7 million euro research programme called CO2 CDR. And it involves a whole range of different research institutions and organisations across Europe. And it's really a multidisciplinary, multi-institutional research programme with a number of objectives. So I apologise now how verbose the next slide is, but just focus on the key underlines. So first of all, we're interested in trying to look at a real economic analysis, a life cycle analysis of different kinds of approaches. We are looking at this thorny issue of monitoring, reporting and verification, but more about that later from our panel. Also looking at the societal acceptance or not acceptance of different kinds of ocean-based carbon dioxide removal. The issue about governance, who gets to decide when, where, what, how all of this is deployed. And in particular, looking at incentivation pathways for businesses to get involved. Because ultimately, if we're ever going to see anything deployed in the world of marine-based carbon dioxide removal or carbon dioxide removal more generally, we need to have businesses involved as well. And then really the last thing is looking at how we go and introduce some of these approaches into some of the more integrated assessment models and helping bring policymakers to the table. So can I stress that this program is not to try and promote one approach over another. It is really to bring to the fore the opportunity and the challenges associated with it of ocean-based carbon dioxide removal. And then secondly, to really try and help provide a framework by which different forms, different approaches of ocean-based carbon dioxide removal can be compared with each other. And I don't like to say that one will ever be better than the other. Each of the different approaches will inevitably have different characteristics. And therefore, depending on the audience, some might be more attractive than others. But the really important thing is to try and understand and elucidate the different kinds of characteristics each approach might have. These are the institutions that are involved in the CO2 CDR project, so mainly from the western part of Europe, but it really is a European funded and therefore European-based initiative, but we collaborate very strongly with entities elsewhere in the world, and we'll give you a few examples of that over the course of the afternoon. So I'm now going to hand over to our first speaker, which is Leo from Ocean Visions, but please don't forget to introduce yourself. Leo, over to you. If you actually start from there, you can stand up if you like. Do you want to stand here? Okay. Okay. And that's for you. Your slides are there.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sean, for the invitation, and thank you for the Ocean Pavilion for hosting us. I'm Leonardo Valenzuela Perez, and I'm Director of International Partnerships for Ocean Visions. And I'm here today representing our organization, and I will give you an overview of where things are right now in terms of research development in the mCDR sector. And I will show you some of our products that are currently, I would say some of them are a point of reference for the sector. And I hope that you can go deeper into this content, and I hope it could be useful and it could make you understand where things stand, and there is no either like an overstating of what is happening in the sector, but also a clear understanding of the very important efforts that are happening. So First of all, a little bit about Ocean Vision. So we are an organization that it's composed of a network of 25 leading institutions, most of them leading oceanographic institutions in the world, and as well as other civil society organizations and NGOs in relevant areas of ocean work. And what we do is we're working at the intersection of climate and ocean, and what we are doing is we have this theory, or we're working with the idea that if we can tackle the issues that the ocean is having right now in terms of acidification, in terms of thermal stress, that are all part of climate impacts, we can also have a major impact back on the climate, on climate stability. So we can solve the climate crisis through solving the ocean crisis. So there is this interlock character of them. So what we do is we facilitate collaborations within our network and beyond, so to fully explore all options available, to look at them in detail, to figure out what are the needs for this sector, and to also support the mobilization of resources for it. So the way we work, we are talking today here about mCDR, but mCDR is one aspect of this comprehensive agenda that we are mobilizing. So our agenda starts from a big concern over decarbonization. So we're looking at several pathways in which the ocean can have an impact on decarbonizing society at large. So ocean products, ocean processes relevant for this, including energy. But also, we're working on removals, as I said, and in this case, is how we can deal with the carbon dioxide pollution that's currently in the ocean, and that we need to figure out quickly, as there no relevant scenario of IPCC right now that doesn't involve at least partially some element of removals. And then we also are working on an agenda of repair. Our repair agenda is focused on stabilizing pieces of the climate system that are very, very relevant for the entire climate system, sorry. But in particular, we are focusing on marine ecosystems. So our latest work was a roadmap on Arctic sea ice. So the same way that we are exploring mCDR options, we're also exploring options to keep the ice for as long as possible in place and function and structure. So, and the last part of all of this, and not less important, is our REACH program, which is our collaboration with the UN Ocean Decade, and it is where we are trying to enhance capacity, where we're trying to enhance collaborations and create a larger program of research around the world in all these areas. Now, where is our removals currently? This is all coming from the State of Carbon Dioxide Removal report from this year. Currently, 99% of all CDR, and I said CDR, a very important part of the Paris Agreement agenda, 99% is still conventional. Only 1% falls in the non-conventional category. That is where we are trying to advance durable, reliable forms of removals. And of all of this, ocean is just like a very, very tiny fraction, as there are no large-scale deployments in this area. So this is something to consider in terms of where this is all standing, what is really the scale of this operation, and what is the challenge in terms of this expectation, or this these scenarios that are talking between 5 and 15 gigatons of carbon that should be removed every year by 2050 through the end of the century. So that's kind of the scenario. Something to consider. So this is the first product that I want to show you, which is our illustration. So this has been really, I would say, a great way to give a graphic form to what some of these operations could look like, what they could entail, and also giving a good sense of what are the different pathways. I think this has been really fundamental in terms of education, but it has also been fundamental to drive some of this collaborative innovation work in the sense that we are already, sorry. I'm hearing a lot of noise, so I'm a bit distracted. So yeah, so yes, just looking at all the different pathways and all what it's necessary, and then as we have this illustration, we also have roadmaps, and roadmaps have been part of a collaborative effort. Collaborative effort to look in detail into the different aspects of each one of these pathways. So we have roadmaps for electrochemical carbon dioxide removal. We have roadmaps for macroalgae cultivation, ocean alkalinity enhancement, macroalgae as well, and blue carbon. So that's what we have covered so far in mCDR. And if you go in detail into each of them, you will find elements that are part of like technical constraints, economic constraints, and also some social elements of what is required for these different pathways to reach maturity. So that's a fundamental part. I invite you to have a look and to explore it. We also have an mCDR community that is attached to this, so you can register and then you can either ask questions or be part of this group that is mobilizing this effort. And a very important product that we launched last year ahead of COP29 was a high-level roadmap. So this high-level roadmap is an exercise by Ocean Visions where we are trying to figure out what will be necessary to do and to know from now until the end of the century, maybe beyond that, but we're using 2030 as a milestone in the Paris Agreement as well. What will be necessary to know, to understand, and in terms of research, in terms of resources, and yeah. So this is where we are working now, where we are bringing more partners to work on this, where we are trying to mobilize additional resources. We have a few announcements that will come up very soon in terms of new funding for these collaborations. And we just recently also did this open call for environmental impact assessment frameworks for mCDR. So we are trying to cover all areas, and we're trying to be guided by this instrument. So another one, go to our website. You can find it there, and yeah, I think it will be also important if you have any comments about it. Like, we are, as an organization, very open to receive all the feedback possible from partners and from anyone interested in the sector. Another thing that I want you to be aware of, which is, I think this is a very unique product that Ocean Visions put out, is a database of field trials and testing of mCDR. So we did an open call for information when we requested information from our community, and we can tell that by the time that by now, like the current moment, there are 53 mCDR field trials planned, in operation, or concluded. That's what we have identified. We always say that if you are aware of any field trials or anything that is going to happen or that happened already, you can also go to our website, and there is a way that you can input these field trials, and they will show up in this map as well. So maybe you cannot see it very well there, but oceanvisions.org, mCDR, field trials, all the information is there. This is very important to give you also a sense of the scale of all of this. Like 53 field trials is like tells you a little bit about the growth of the sector, but also like really the scale. When we sometimes hear some overstatements about the proliferation of these activities, so far this is the scale that we have encountered. And also from the report of the state of mCDR, you can see that there has been, in the last 3 years, an important growth in field trials and experiments. However, this has only been in a few techniques. So there are a few others where the advancement is limited, and there are many reasons probably for that, including some related to international regulations, and that's all part of an exploration to like how to balance all these requirements, all these all these steps that need to be met, but also how to advance the science that is necessary to understand the potential of all these options. So this is for funding. Where the funding is today, we will say that is clearly insufficient in terms of what we have included in our high-level roadmap. However, we identified that, I mean, this is coming from the report, the state of CDR, but 190 million total CDR RD&D funding in 2022, growing. 25 million plus in philanthropic support. This has been a really important vehicle to fund these operations. And yeah, and the U.S. government, I think, it was a big breakthrough last year with some instruments for funding coming from DOE, coming from NOAA, and there is like a big interrogation mark at this point, coming from where is this going from now on, and given the recent developments, and if there is viability to continue support for these activities. So that's all I wanted to to say, and thank you very much.
So we're now going to be joined by Margaret Leinen from Scripps. I'm going to let Margaret introduce herself properly, but it's an absolute pleasure to have Margaret with us this afternoon.
Thanks so much. Margaret Leinen, I'm the director of Scripps Institution of Oceanography and vice chancellor for marine science at University of California, San Diego. Yeah, I'm going to leave them on because then there's not so much distraction from the halls. So I was asked to talk a little bit about this issue of assessment, and we call it monitoring, reporting, and validation. So for the experiments that are being done, and then eventually, if any of these techniques are selected for deployment, we need to know what's happening. This is a real challenge for oceanographers. The carbon system, not just in the ocean, but on the planet, is the most complicated chemical system on the planet. And we're talking about perturbing that at a place and hoping that it's going to do something important to the atmosphere. So we really need to be able to look at it at several scales. We're going to do a perturbation, the people that are interested in doing this are going to add something or take something away, and they're going to do it at a location. And a lot of things are going to happen very quickly there. And just the work that we have done already shows us that there's a lot of very fine scale activity, some of which Katja Fennell has shown has the ability to affect drawdown very close to the place where you're putting something in or taking something out. So we're going to have to understand the processes that are going on there. And then that area is going to start mixing with the rest of the ocean. And a big question is whether those processes continue to take place further away or whether it's another set of processes that take over. So we're going to have to be able to do process studies to understand what's going on, and then we're going to have to put those in larger frameworks. And finally, many in the community and many outside the community are concerned that if we perturb the ocean in one place and draw down CO2, that CO2 may reemerge somewhere else. So ultimately, we've also got to be able to look at a much broader scale. So this gives us multiple scales at which we have to do monitoring, reporting, and validation. And a second challenge is how to approach the study of negative impacts, whether those are impacts on biology, whether they're impacts on other processes. If the release of material is happening close to shore, is it affecting coastal environments? So being able to define what those are and what we need to look at is also an important thing. And even more important here than in designing these process study experiments, we have to engage the people that are worried about those impacts, the people who might be impacted, whether that's fishers or whether that's people that are in the coastal environment, whether people are worried about the biodiversity of the ocean as a result. And so they are going to have to inform us about what their concerns are so that we can do the monitoring, reporting, and validation that will, in turn, inform them about the degree to which this is a concern for them. A second thing is that during this time, we've all been, the time when these experiments are taking place, as well as other attempts to design monitoring, reporting, and validation, the science is going to evolve. So what we might see as the right way to do it now may evolve with time. A second piece is, the whole point of this is that IPCC has said that we're going to have to remove carbon actively from the atmosphere in order to avoid exceeding 1.5 degrees. That means a substantial scale up. That means that we need to understand the life cycle of this. And as you heard, Ocean Visions has been looking at that. But even in addition to the life cycle, we have to understand what it costs to scale up. And perhaps one technique may not be as efficient, but it might be much more quick to scale up, or it might be much cheaper to scale up. And so we have to look at the scalability as well as just the assessment of whether it works or not. Finally, there's the issue of the degree to which this is going to be funded by the private sector, the degree to which it's going to be funded by governments, the degree to which, if it's funded by the private sector, what the price generation piece is there. And so that means that we really have to have some sense of the way that the markets will value this. And as we do more monitoring, reporting, and validation, we're going to be providing them with more information about the quality of the estimate. How does that play into the market? It's called the price of greater knowledge. And we've seen what happened with a lack of price of greater knowledge with forestry. And if this is to be considered, we really have to have some sense of how much detailed information is going to be required by markets. Last couple of points. We need to understand how to deal with the considerable negative impression of marine carbon dioxide removal. Will it be possible for organizations to actually do, I call them experiments that are bigger than a Volkswagen, something that you do off the dock. And the pushback on that is substantial. So how do we engage people to understand that nobody's going to do it without doing the research? The last piece, the ethical framework for this. And there are very serious and I don't mean serious negative, very serious negative, very serious ethical issues with perturbing the ocean. The American Geophysical Union just a couple of months ago put out an ethical framework for this kind of activity. And I think that the thing that I'd like to say about that is that it was a 2-year process. It not only engaged the 60,000 members of AGU, who are the scientists in Earth, ocean, atmosphere, and climate, but it engaged the public in many ways. And it had active involvement from historians of science, ethicists, lawyers, governments, etc. And a lot of this, people have been talking about the ethics for a long time. This ethical framework is not dramatically different from ethical frameworks of 15 years ago, but it sure involved a lot more people who had input to it. And that is really critical for us in all of these areas, to involve the public and to be totally transparent about what we're doing. Thanks.
So, Mark, Thank you ever so much indeed. We're now going to follow that with Jill Story from the World Ocean Council, and Jill is one of the partners of the CO2 CDR program, the Horizon Europe funded program that I mentioned earlier. But Jill, if you would do a proper introduction to yourself, that would be fantastic. Here is the slide.
Well, thank you very much, Sean, and thank you very much to the Ocean Pavilion. We're delighted to be here. As Sean mentioned, I'm Jill Story. I'm the Marine Carbon Dioxide Removal Advisor for the World Ocean Council. And just really, it's such an important topic. I really hope that this topic in terms of marine CDR gets the profile it needs at this COP, and I'll come on to put it into context, which I think Margaret and Leonardo have done partly. The World Ocean Council are the commercialisation partner for the EU project, so I'm going to look at the supply side of the market and the demand side of the market, and then how we need to build the ecosystem. So firstly, it's been touched on before in terms of just putting this into context. The IPCC have said that we need 10 gigatons of carbon removal by 2050. And I know it's sometimes quite hard to think about 10 gigatons. How much is 10 gigatons? Well, 10 gigatons, we know that the current emissions are close to 40 gigatons a year. So that's 25% of current emissions we need in terms of removals per annum. It's actually larger than the current emissions of the US and India combined. And in terms of where we are now, there's an organisation called CDR FYI that they monitor durable removals. And according to their data, for 2023, in terms of durable removals, we're at 4.5 million tons of removals at that time. So if we've got to get from 2023 to 2050, in terms of get to 10 gigatons, that's over a 2,200 times increase. It means that it has to be the fastest growing industry in history. So if we thought that solar was moving quickly, we need a growth of about 34% per annum for 26 years, which is really sort of off the scale. But I think it's important really to stress that point because in terms of the focus and the investment, it's not something that we can wait. We can't wait till 2049 and wake up and turn the whole ecosystem on in a year. There's a lot of infrastructure, there's a lot of players in the ecosystem and processes that need to be developed, as well as all of the research and development we've been hearing about so far. So in terms of on the economic side, so for people who there's a lot of people hopefully here who are focused on trying to do the right thing for the climate and the planet. But everybody has their self-interest. So if that's not your driver for being here, if you look at the economics, this is McKinsey have said this is going to be a $1.2 trillion industry by 2050. So there's a lot of incentives to be involved in this space. In terms of 90% of the 4.5 million tons of durable CDR that we've had so far, 90% of that has been land-based solutions. And we know that the ocean is 71% of the surface of the planet, and it's the largest carbon dioxide sink. So it seems that it's the obvious place to look. If we alter and make small adjustments, that can have a significant impact on the removals. And in terms of some of the pathways, NASAM brought out this report in 2022, and if you're new to this space, it's a very good place to start in terms of learning about the sector, and then also Ocean Visions, as Leonardo has mentioned, has got some fantastic materials about getting further into the detail of the different roadmaps for the solutions. I know sometimes when you see a picture like this, you might think, well, is this just imaginary of what's going to be something happens in the future? And at COP26, I was on a panel with Sean, and I remember the last thing that I said on that panel was, well, we're looking forward, we're talking about the supply and the demand side, and so we're looking forward to actually getting some of these people with the ideas and the innovation into the water to be doing their pilots. And as we heard from Leonardo in terms of the Ocean Visions, that fantastic map in terms of showing the field trials, things have happened in that time. And I thought last week the World Ocean Council had their conference in Barcelona, and we had a number of the leading mCDR companies present. So I just thought I would just show you a couple of images quickly of some of those players, so you can see that actually things are really happening on the supply side. And it is early days, but things are moving rapidly. So this image is GigaBlue. They're undertaking trials in New Zealand, and actually I noticed that they're not on the map yet, so they need to be on the field trial map. This is Brilliant Planet. They are have their demonstration plant in Morocco. This is CO2, which is a Dutch company. They just received $2 million of investment a few weeks ago. This is Macro Carbon. They're developing sargassum. This is Project Vesta. This is off Long Island. They're looking at putting olivine onto the beaches to help restore for coastal restoration. This is Rewind. They're looking at putting biomass into the Black Sea. And so we can see that things are actually starting to happen on the supply side. But with these early stage companies, on the supply side, it's quite difficult when you've got a new innovation if there's not a demand for it, because how are you going to go to investors and say, well, please invest in our early stage company. We've got a brilliant idea, but the investors are going to say, well, where's your revenue stream coming from? So what happened on the demand side at COP26, and this is probably why we've seen a lot happening in the last 3 years, is in terms of now we've got, of the top 2,000 global public companies, listed companies by size, 60% of them have got net zero commitments. So then this is where the demand is going to come from. But at the moment, it's quite early stage. So of those companies, not all of those companies, they might have their net zero headline, and they're building their strategies, but not all of the companies have got into the detail in terms of how they're going to get there. We're lucky in this space to have some organizations like Microsoft. Microsoft, as many of you will know, are the largest purchaser of durable removals. They've actually purchased 70% of the removable credits on the market. And I'll just also touch on Frontier as well, because this is quite interesting. So Frontier are an advanced market commitment. Frontier, it's a combination of organisations that have come together to buy credits in advance to actually help the market deliver. They've got a $1 billion advance commitment to buy removals over the period from 2022 to 2030. So in that coalition, there's Stripe, Alphabet, Meta, McKinsey, and they're doing an amazing job for the development of the removals market, because by showing there's the demand, it's enabling some of those early stage startups to get investment. So hopefully that gives you just a bit of a flavour to show that it's early stage, but things have started to move quite quickly, and we're seeing more players come into the space on a daily basis now. So thank you.
Thanks ever so much indeed, Jill. Right, we're going to conclude our presentations with Paul Morris, who's from the Woods Hole Institution, and I'll let Paul introduce himself, but this is a particular approach to carbon dioxide removal that I am excited about. I'm excited about many of them, but this one actually looks as if it really could be scalable if we can actually show that it can work and actually address some of the concerns that Margaret laid out as well. Paul, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And it's a real pleasure to be here at the Ocean Pavilion at COP. It's my first COP. It's nice to see some familiar faces and lots of new faces as well. So my name is Paul Morris. I'm the project manager for this program, XOS, Exploring Ocean Iron Solutions. We're a program housed at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And so I'm going to change tack here and just talk a little bit more about one form of CDR that we're hoping to research. So just to give some context to the problem ahead, we've heard some of this already, but what we are tackling here is we have 40 gigatons of carbon being released into the atmosphere every year. Just to give you some context, 1 gigaton is the equivalent of having a coal train wrapped around the Earth 4 times. That's just one. And we're releasing 40 gigatons of carbon per year. And really, we have to decarbonize the economy, and we have to reduce our fossil fuel emissions that way. But there's always going to be legacy carbon in the atmosphere, and we have to have some way of removing that. And so that's where one of these CDR techniques, which we think could be scalable, cheap, is fertilizing the oceans with iron, essentially using natural processes. And really, the ocean shouldn't be off the table. I think everything has to be on the table in order to figure out if we can fix the climate crisis. And the deep ocean is a huge reservoir of carbon. It's 15 to 20 times more carbon than in land plants and soils, and has 50 times more carbon than what's in the atmosphere. And the question is whether we can get a little bit more of that carbon from the atmosphere into the deep ocean and do that safely and effectively. We don't know the answers to this yet, but we need to do the research to figure out whether it is possible and the right thing to do. And you've seen some of these images from the National Academy's report and some slides earlier today. And these are some different forms of CDR that you can have in the marine environment. When we're talking about the ocean iron fertilization here on the left, but you can see there's a whole swath of different methods of mCDR. And really it's figuring out whether they're viable and which ones could be deployed in the right places at the right times under the right circumstances. And we need to get a grasp of, what those different parameters are in order to answer those questions. And so for ocean iron fertilization, we actually have quite a head start on the field. There's been a lot of research of fertilizing the oceans with iron in the past. There's been about 13 experiments in the 90s and early 2000s. And you can see on here, they've essentially been able to do relatively small-scale perturbations. These are viewable from space, and this one on the right here, the satellite image, is from a Southern Ocean experiment. I think it was Soiree. They added just over 1 ton of iron, and they thought they measured 2,000 tons of carbon removed. And they're fertilizing, the phytoplankton in the surface ocean. And these are, primarily diatoms. They're very fast growing. And so when they die or get eaten, they can sink and take that carbon with them down through the water column. And this is all sort of taken from John Martin, who proposed the iron hypothesis. And, just adding a little bit of iron can have a big impact. And so we think that it's very scalable in this way. And so one thing that was not really answered during these early experiments is whether the carbon was exported, or how efficient the carbon export was, and really in how durable that sequestration was. And they were really just testing the iron hypothesis. They weren't really testing it for the purposes of doing mCDR seriously. And so really now we have to design experiments, sort of a new wave, a new generation of experiments that really have the monitoring of the blooms of when they actually happen. And so it's about figuring out whether you can get that iron beneath a certain depth in the ocean so that it is locked away from the atmosphere for a significant amount of time. And we are using a term, what we call the centennial ton, which is 1 ton of carbon locked away from 100 years. And that's really relevant on the sort of climate issues over the next century. And so there are certain parts of the ocean where this is quite well constrained. For example, if you go to some parts, you need to just get the carbon below 500 meters, say up in the Northeast Pacific. If you can get the carbon down below 500 meters, then you've locked it away for 100 years. And so this is different in different parts of the ocean, so we have to figure out which are the best places in the ocean where iron is limiting, where you can get the carbon deep down in order to lock it away from the atmosphere. And so what are we going to do? How are we going to organize ourselves? And so this is a program exploring, and exploring is the key word here. We're not saying it is a solution. We need to explore it and do the research to figure out if it can be one of the solutions. And so it's exploring ocean iron solutions. We call it EXOIS. And it's an international consortium of experts that have really been gathered around from a bottom-up approach, building from a scientific base. And we currently now have 60 members across 37 institutions on 9 different countries. We're trying to be as inclusive and expansive as possible. And we're an independent program housed at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. We're not a mandated program out of Hui. That's where we're housed. And EXOIS really needs to foster the partnerships for scientific research and outreach. And we are trying to also bring in new scientists so that we can have that generational knowledge be passed down to essentially hand the baton on to to do these experiments going over the next 5, 10 and longer years. And this group now has been around for about not quite 3 years. They've met twice in person. The first meeting was back in May 23, and they got together for a week and essentially came out with this path forward document. And it essentially lays out the different pathways of what they need to do to implement the research and get the answers we need in order to inform policy and decision makers. This paper, this Path Forward white paper, has now been published in Frontiers. There are some copies at the back of the room, so please take a copy if you're more interested. Or you can go to our website, oceaniron.org, which you can get more information about this. And it's essentially, this group is discussing, what do we have to do to figure out the durability, the scalability, figuring out if we can do it safely. And we call this EMRV, Ecological and Environmental Monitoring, Reporting and Verification. So not just doing the carbon accounting, but also figuring out whether the system is being perturbed in a negative way. We need to know what those parameters are and whether they're being pushed beyond the limits of what we want them to be. And also the cost of what it's going to take and the ethical standards as well. And before everything started, there was a set of guiding principles that was essentially formulated. 2 of the authors for this piece of work are actually here in the Ocean Pavilion, so please take chances, Margaret and Rama as well. And essentially, this has to be done for the benefit of humans and the environment. If we're doing it too wrong, then if we figure out that it's not the right thing to do, then we should stop. And we need to establish clear lines of responsibility. So doing this with permits under the London Conventions and Protocols, do it in an open and transparent way, and do it in an iterative way, scaling up from what we know works up to bigger pilot studies, and doing it in a public engagement way as well, making sure the public is informed and they know that this is coming and it can be part of the solution. So with that, I think I've just stayed within my 10 minutes, but thank you very much.
Great, thank you ever so much indeed, Paul. So we now have time for some questions. So I invite you to offer a question. I'll give the microphone, and can I be bold? You've got a microphone at the back. Can I be bold? And I would prefer a question from a lady first, if possible, and then I'll share with you why. Any questions from the? Yes, please. Can you
hear me on this?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My question is about the real, how can I say, demand signal. Because 2 weeks ago, I joined the climate tech event in US, and there's a discussion about CDL, not only about mCDR, but all CDL, because the cost of CDR is so high that very big, large companies like Microsoft or Salesforce can purchase, but not for many companies, because they do not have that kind of the fiscal capacity. So how do you still believe that this type of the behavior by big companies would support or would send the signal to supplier side?
Great. Jill, I think that's one for you, if you don't mind.
Thank you very much. It's a very, very good question.
And remember the short answers.
Yes, I think one way of doing it, because it is hard for some organisations to get involved, I think there's two ways. One way is the certain industry sectors are starting to pull together coalitions. So, for example, airlines are starting also to make purchases now. But I think just in general, for a number of companies to come together and actually start off buying a small amount, just to actually go through that process and understand. Because I think in a few years' time, those organisations that get in early will actually have quite an advantage, because we're going to find that the demand for durable removals is much greater than the supply. Just an example of, in Australia, there's a large gas provider, Santos, has got a $22 billion valuation. They've been sued by their activist shareholders because although they've got a net zero commitment for 2040, they're saying there's no tangible plan of getting there. So I think getting the tangible plan, and when people realise for their tangible plan, they're going to need removals in that plan.
Great. Right, another question, please. I think Charles was first. Just behind you, Charles.
Yeah, so Paul, I'm wondering if you're also in your ocean iron fertilization studies, if you're also considering the benefit of these phytoplankton blooms that are created in terms of supporting fish populations and how that might factor into the carbon removal.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for the question. I think we have to always take a step back. The reason we're doing this is for removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. That's our number one priority. There's no doubt that there may be co-benefits. They're very difficult to figure out whether they are related or not. And so if we do the research and we're doing it in an open, transparent way, we can always say, well, if the fishery scientists want to come and do their studies as well at the same time, then please come along. But at the moment, we're focused on essentially doing the carbon accounting and figuring out the EMRV at the location where we're doing it, and who knows what will come out of that in terms of co-benefits further down the line.
Great. Another question, please. Yes, the lady here, please. No, I'll explain my rationale later. Okay.
All right. Thank you. My question is on how do we make sure that some of these removal techniques are actually like net removing, right? How do we make sure that we don't end up in a situation? I'm thinking, iron. It does take a lot of energy and a lot of, resources to get all that iron so that we can fertilize, so that then we can draw down some more iron. And how do we make sure that this does not end up being something like the early electrical cars, right? Where we spend a bunch of time and energy and resources building these batteries that end up being like plus minus a little bit, negative.
Margaret, can I offer this to you? Thank you.
Thanks. That's a great question, and it's absolutely necessary. And it's going to take a systems analysis approach to looking at that. So there are so many pieces in. One of them is, yes, what are the raw materials that you're working with? Also, what are the energy costs associated with that? And those sorts of things tell us whether it's a net benefit. Once you've determined that it's a net benefit, then the question is the scalability. Can you scale up to anything that is going to make a difference No one technique is going to take 10 gigatons, but would you be able to make a significant fraction of that with the technique? And that's going to depend a lot on the technology pathway, the adoption, whether every country would allow this in their EEZ or out in the open ocean, or whether only a few would do it. So there are so many aspects to the scalability that it really has to be taken on as a full-scale study for each different kind of technique.
Great, thank you. Right, we had a question, Paul, and then I'm coming to the front.
Thank you. Can you compare the pros and cons of taking carbon out of the ocean as opposed to taking it directly out of the air? I suspect taking it out of the ocean is a lot more efficient a process. And if you take it out of the ocean, of course, it's going to come out of the air, right, in this balance.
So can I invite Leo to have a go at this first? Okay, or Margaret, but there was a beautiful image in that was shown more than once of electrochemical removal. So over to you, Margaret.
The basic reason that people are pursuing this is that you're leveraging oceanic processes as opposed to something like direct air capture, where you're developing a non-natural process, all the technology associated with it, and then the additional cost of doing something to put the CO2, the carbon away. And with ocean techniques, you're leveraging a natural process, and you've got a receptacle.
Great. Right, some more questions. At the front, I did promise at the front. And then I'll take the one at the back.
Thank you. One of the speakers mentioned the experience with the carbon credits in the forestry sector, how they kind of, is a race to the bottom, low quality. Why would that not happen here if we're hoping that the private sector is going to drive the development of the mCDR market? There's already been instances, Planktos, Russ George rushing ahead for, some would say, profit reasons. Now Running Tide rushing ahead, closing down now because some people say their science wasn't sound. So I guess why would we have any confidence that this won't be hijacked by the private?
So just to ensure I have diversity in the comment, Leo, could you comment on especially the range of entities whom were involved in the compilation of your roadmaps, please? You had lots of different...
Yeah, I know, but just addressing the first part. So, one, you're mentioning Planktos. Like, if I am good, like, writing the map, you're talking about, like, late 2000s. So, at the time that some of these things were not even considered as part of, like, a climate strategy necessarily, or Russ George himself and that experience, all of those things happening in a kind of Wild West situation where there was no framework, there was no governance to it, there was no, basically no supervision to what was happening then. And then I would say, like on the Running Tide that you're mentioning now, I think that's slightly different, and it's kind of an early experience on how this is being developed, and it's just trying to figure out how you are going to create the path for something, and probably there are many mistakes happening there, but still there was no clear regulation on how this is going to be, like what is the structure or what is the form of say the credit, or like at Ocean Visions we're not necessarily very focused on this aspect. We want to figure out what works and what doesn't work. But I think it's a big part of this, like monitoring, verification, and reporting, or what was the concept you used? Validation, yes. So I think that is a big part, and a big part is creating the appropriate frameworks, creating the regulation. There is a lot of mistrust on the role of the private sector, which is understandable. But I think one point to consider is what type of I
want to get two more questions.
Okay, fine. What type of like oversight there will be from government? So when you don't see a lot of willingness to engage in that type of regulation on creating the permitting frameworks, then you have a problem where people just try to do things and they start colliding. So I think it's a matter of like waiting to see what could be done with quality.
So there is a role clearly for the establishment of different standards. Can I have a question at the back, please? Really quick, because I'd like another one at the front as well.
Yeah. Thank you for the session. It's really interesting. So I have a question. There are a lot of approaches, such as electrochemical approach, open ocean, ocean alkalinity enhancement, pH equilibrated ocean alkalinity enhancement, etc. What do you see as the big challenges that those approaches have to scale up? Is permits, is purchase agreements with buyers, is supply chain of alkaline feedstock regulation? I mean, what's your thought about it?
So I'm going
Thank
to
you.
use the chair's prerogative and try and answer that question myself, and that is all of the above. All right, seriously, there are loads because we're at such a nascent stage, and I think there are lots and lots of challenges. There are huge opportunities, but this is definitely a space where there are challenges that we all need to work together with in a research environment. Can I take one last question from the front, please?
Leo, you mentioned already the London Protocol. Now, I think in the making is the new agreement of United Nations, the BBNJ agreement. And one of the 4 areas of that agreement is about environmental impact assessment. So how this mCDR may cooperate or conflict with the new emerging agreement?
So a 30-second answer. Go on.
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, go on, go on.
Yeah. So, London Protocol, it's still like very, very small, and the amendment 2013 only ratified by 6 countries so far. So there is a problem there in terms of like how to establish that governance and make it work. So I think there are limitations on how that has proceeded so far, and we are closely collaborating really, and we're trying to get more involved. And I can give you, if anyone wants to talk about that, I was recently at the meeting of London Protocol, London Convention, so I can give you more on that. It's much more complex. Now on BBNJ, we are from Ocean Visions, and we will soon announce this. We will be working next year on the integration of governance across the different intergovernmental like bodies that had some role on this, including BBNJ, because we think this should be done now that we are still in the process of ratification, and definitely like strategic environmental assessment of the type that is required for BBNJ. It's crucial. It's something that will be very important to advance this type of work, and will be very relevant to like create permitting systems if we get to that type of maturity.
Thanks. Great. I'm just mindful I'm being nudged here in terms of to maybe keep to time. Right, I promised you I would share a little story. Baroness Bryony Worthington gave me a top tip when I was director of the Royal Institution. I was always challenged about trying to get diversity of views from the audience and diversity of panelists as well. And she told me, don't be shy, be bold. And actually, she said there was evidence to say if the first question is actually asked by a lady, actually you get far more diversity within the room. So actually, I've taken that at heart. And so I apologize for being so blunt, but I took my tips from a baroness in the House of Lords. I want to thank our panelists for this afternoon. Thank you so much for an incredibly stimulating conversation about the world of marine-based carbon dioxide removal. Thank you.